Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us from all over the country for our 2020 debut of Football Fridays at the AC. I'm Chris Palmquist from the Notre Dame Alumni Association. Now, in a typical year, we'd be here on campus, enjoying live music, tailgate food, interviews, and student performances. We can't help you with the hot dogs and hamburgers today, but we can bring you just about everything else in this hour-long celebration of the Notre Dame family and the Notre Dame football team. We'll check in with the Leprechaun and Cheerleaders. We'll hear from students on their expectations for this unique season. We'll talk about the Duke matchup, and we'll even hear from Irish head coach Brian Kelly about the upcoming season. But to start things off, earlier this week, Dolly Duffy, the executive director of your Notre Dame Alumni Association, had a chance to catch up with one of the most decorated quarterbacks in Notre Dame history, Fox Sports college football analyst and a member of the class of 2007, Brady Quinn.
Well, hello, Brady Quinn. How are you?
I'm doing well, Dolly. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to have a chance to visit with you today. And I have so many questions that I want to ask you about your time off the field. But at first, I want to find out a little bit about when you look back and think about your time at Notre Dame, what are some of your best memories?
Oh, man. Yeah, it's funny. I think as a student athlete, a lot of times people always think, those memories are going to be stuff in regards to the sport that you played. For me, I think it was, probably like settling into Notre Dame, my first time really walking on campus, knowing that that's where I was going to grow up for the next 4 years of my life. And I remember walking around in the dome, just kind of looking around and taking it all in. And I'd been before. I'd had a buddy whose brother had gone there, so I'd gone up for some games. Obviously, I'd been recruited, but it feels different when you know this is home. And so that really stood out to me. I think, saying goodbye, kind of looking back on all of it, kind of stood out. The first time running through the tunnel, just through the vantage point of having a helmet on and looking through the face mask and then being able to see the crowd and everything else. That's one I'll probably never forget. So, honestly, a lot of it, I think probably had to do a little bit more with some of the kind of fun times and things, maybe even outside of football and some of the relationships that I built over time, more so than maybe anything in particular in regard to sports, but obviously football played a big role in that too.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, what dorm?
So I was Zom for my first 2 years, and then I moved my junior year to Dillon, and then I moved off for my final year.
Wow. 1 year in Dillon.
Yeah, 1 year in Dillon. I love my experience in both. Obviously, I was born into Zom Hall, which was kind of a crazy place. It felt like a little better move for me. I was going to be living with in Dillon a couple of football players. I had a prime location really close to the dining hall. That was obviously big for all of us. So that played a factor in it as well. And then obviously Father Doyle was our rector. So.
Well, you're probably looking forward to going back and seeing the remodel of Dillon.
I am. Hopefully whenever we can get back on campus, I'd love to go back and kind of walk around and obviously take it all in. I've got 3 little girls now, so I'm trying to plant that seed very early in their lives that this is where they're going to be going to school at some point in the future. Well,
since we're talking about the 3 little girls, tell us about them and tell us, what's it like to be the father of 3 girls?
Oh man, it's incredible. I think parenthood for those that experienced it obviously is it's unlike really anything. I mean, you can try to describe it, but it is so unique, and the feelings and emotions that come along with it for your children are so unique. But we have a 4-year-old daughter named Sloan. She is as sweet as can be, energetic, talks all the time, 24/7. She's like Miss Personality, Miss Congeniality. Our 2-year-old Tegan, she is the tough one of the group. She's obviously at a tough age right now in her terrible 2s, but she can be sweet when she wants to, but she really makes you work for it when you get those opportunities to kind of give her some affection. And then our sweetest baby so far is Cassidy, and that is our almost 7-month-old. She's as sweet as can be. She's been a pretty good baby for the most part. Probably our most difficult baby, if I'm being honest, but all 3 of them already have such different, unique personalities. And so it's going to be fun to watch their journey. But in regards to being a father of 3 girls, I think the thing that sticks out to me the most is just the importance and as far as my role in their life and in reinforcing certain things and, making sure they understand they can accomplish anything they set their mind to. And I've already tried to kind of instill that early on with our 4-year-old and Sloan. And look, I'm blessed because my better half was a former Olympian. I shouldn't say former. I always get a hard time about that, but she was an Olympic gymnast. So they've got an incredible role model as their mom to try to follow in her footsteps.
Well, they have incredible role models as both parents and a lot to live up to. So I think most of our audience knows you. Since you retired, you've been working with Fox News in the booth. And so you have a great bird's eye view of all of this. When you look at what Brian Kelly has been able to achieve at Notre Dame, what does that look like to you? And what do you think it's going to unfold this season?
I think he's been the model of consistency as far as providing excellence, but at the same time, maintaining that high quality standard of play, but also academic progress as well. When you look at how the guys have performed in the classroom and just the type of young men that he's continued to develop. So that's one thing that I think I can honestly say I'm proud of, the way those young men have developed and gone on and the people that they've become as they've become pros. As far as this season, I think one of the things that he has going for him is he's got leaders like Ian Book, guys like that who through a turbulent time, a time where they didn't have spring ball, you're going into now the first time in forever. They'll be a part of a conference. And there's something that comes along with that, right? Playing against a bunch of other Power 5 teams that all are very familiar with one another and obviously a tough opponent in Clemson. So, it's going to be a new experience. It's going to be difficult considering the curveballs that have been thrown their way with COVID. However, I think you lean on some of those experienced upperclassmen like a guy like Ian Book to help lead the way for the team and kind of help venture through this unknown. But I think it bodes well for them, in my opinion, at least looking at this upcoming season and I think what they can accomplish.
Great. And Coach Kelly just recently said that his goal is to win the title, the ACC conference. What do you think about that? Can you do it?
I think they've got a great shot. I really, and I've said this, and it probably comes off as a little bit arrogant, but I don't care. I mean, it's the truth. The ACC should be happy that Notre Dame joined them for football because of outside of Clemson, it's really been one of the weaker Power 5 conferences when you look at some of the teams and how the Florida States and Miamis and some of the traditional schools that I think we view growing up as more competitive. They've been down of late, and I think it's been Clemson leading the way by a large margin. So now that you have Notre Dame as part of that group, a team that's been to the college football playoff, I think it adds to the depth and I think also the reputation of that conference and how it looks this year. So, look, Notre Dame and Clemson square off. Depending on how that game goes, I wouldn't be shocked if we did potentially see them playing again for the ACC championship.
Well, so I'm sure in your time in the booth with a couple of USC guys, they tell you every once in a while that Notre Dame is arrogant. What's it like to be with the two of them? And especially just given the incredible rivalry between the two schools.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of respect in some ways. It's tough at times because there's a lot of trash talk. They had the better of us during their time there. But as we all witness, sometimes when you don't do it the right way, you get caught, you get in trouble, and then you pay your price for that. So a lot of those conversations occur. But, this year, that's the unfortunate thing is, we won't have the opportunity to see that rivalry or see those teams square off. And so I think they're kind of down in the dumps right now, to be honest with you, because the one, there hasn't been much to talk about in regards to USC of late. It's basically since those guys left, since they stopped cheating. And then, now when you look at that rivalry, it hasn't really been much of a rivalry of late. And, now they're not even playing this year. So I think they're a little bit bummed about it. But, the reality is I'm not sure what really would have mattered this year anyway for them. Notre Dame probably would have won again.
Absolutely. So outside of football, I've always wanted to ask you this question. Now I get to do it in the form of an interview. For 10 years, you've had the Third and Gold Foundation. And I've just always had a great interest in how did you start that foundation and why this?
Seems like things are always spurred by like a moment in time. And for me, I was with the Denver Broncos in training camp. I happened to meet a couple of wounded veterans who came out to see. They're big Broncos fans. They came out to see us, talk to us. And I just happened to ask one in particular that was a double amputee. And I said, hey, what can we do to help you with your transition back to civilian life? I said, he said, I'm living with my parents right now to help adapt before I can kind of maybe find a place on my own. I said, the problem is the home isn't suited for someone in a wheelchair. And so it dawned on me at the time, to figure out, all right, this might be a niche or something that we can help provide for those who are coming back that are in a similar situation. So I talked to my father. He was a former Marine in Vietnam. He happened to be a home builder. And, our idea was, all right, let's try to find someone who's in need in the Central Ohio area. He could donate his labor and materials, and we could fund this project for a veteran in need. And so it started in Central Ohio with our first project back in 2011. And from that point moving forward, we continue to grow and expand the Third and Goal Foundation and how we've gone about helping and improving the lives of veterans.
When you look at the foundation, and by the way, I have two sons, both of whom are military. One in the Air Force and one in Navy ROTC. So I love the fact that you're doing it. And then just once again, you make us proud. When you look back at the 10 years that you've been doing this, what's one of the stories that touched you the most?
Probably Sergeant Shane Parsons. He was one of our first recipients. We had helped remodel and adapt the entryways into his home to make him handicap accessible for him. And it also helped, bathroom, kitchen, those areas. But his story in particular, just because, he was brave enough to tell it in front of a full ballroom, but he talked about how it wasn't even his shift, that he actually stayed on because he had a buddy who, was concerned it was going to be his last shift before he was sent back home. And he said, I'm still up. I'm still wired. I'm going to go ahead and take it for you. And so, he stayed out on patrol, and they ended up getting hit by an IED, and, he ended up, losing both his legs. And so you hear a story like that, and it just crushes you because, not only was he selfless enough to, go put his life on the line and serve in our country, but even in that moment, he was doing above and beyond, what was required of him or asked of him. And this is the unfortunate reality that he was dealt with for this point moving forward. So Sergeant Shane Parsons definitely is one that, really kind of speaks to the heart as far as everything that he endured. And it kind of provided us like inspiration of why we're doing what we're doing and why we continue to keep trying to grow and expand. That's
great. Well, before we wind down, we do have a handful of questions that we received on social media. So I'm going to fire a few of them at you. Chris says, what was your favorite meal at the dining hall?
Oh, gosh. I'd have to go back and think. I was big because my schedule was so busy. Usually I got a good breakfast in. And then the rest of the day, it was like grab and go sometimes at the dining hall if I could in between class. Because, we didn't have a training table like they do now. So those guys are lucky. But then at the end of the day, it was like grabbing food to go a lot of times in the dining halls. So breakfast was one of the only ones where I really had that opportunity to kind of sit down and actually eat. I always loved the omelets there. It was usually a mixture of, fruit omelets or an omelet and kind of potatoes or something like that. It was kind of something boring, but that was like the one meal that always stood out to me that I always feel like I actually got to sit down and eat. Every other meal for me was a lot of time was on the go.
So you did both North and South quad.
Correct.
North dining hall, South dining hall, which is better?
Oh man, I feel bad saying this because I spent more time early in my years there at North, but I think it was South, and I think it was because my dorm was so close to it, my dorm room in particular, that it was just so convenient and so easy. And so I think it just I had better feelings with South, and plus it was right across from where we had study hall. So a lot of times too, when I was grabbing dinner, I was grabbing something quick out of South. So I think I'd probably have to be on the South side, South dining hall.
Okay, so Stephanie Allen wants to know, how will a lower number of fans in the stadium affect the players?
Yeah, it's a good question. Honestly, I don't know that there's going to be a big impact either way. I think the one thing that probably stands out is just the lack of that home field advantage where, from a noise standpoint, people aren't going to be able to congregate together. And I think when you see that place full and it's rocking, that noise, the crowd, it really makes it tough for the opponents. But also, like, when you need to pick me up as a player, there's a real feeling where, like, you can feel that synergy, you can feel that momentum. And so not having it quite as big as it normally is, I think that might play a little bit of a factor just in even when times are going good and you've got that, positive flow going on, be able to feel that momentum in that stadium.
Great. Zach Perez wants to know, what was the most difficult road or neutral site game you played?
Difficult road. That's a tough one. I mean, usually when you say difficult, I always think of the noise, right? Because that's what makes your job difficult as a quarterback, is your communication. And then it obviously makes it hard for the offensive line and everyone else. So the two loudest places were definitely down in Knoxville, down in Tennessee, Neyland Stadium. That place was loud. It was rocking. It was nuts. I think it was like a 3 or 4 o'clock start, but like by the end of that game, when the sun started to go down, it felt like a night game. And that was a really, really loud, tough environment to play in. Fortunately we got a win there. And then Michigan was probably the other one. It's tough to ignore 110,000 people. So I think my only start there, we won, but that was another place that was incredibly loud. And I think it was always a physical battle against them. So you knew that was going to be tough. And then Michigan State, I mean, for whatever reason, we always had tough battles with Michigan State. And I just remember their fans there was the most obscene, dirty things I've ever seen to this day. I mean, that includes like going out and playing the Raiders, the black hole and that whole deal. Michigan State fans were like the nastiest going in. And so that kind of stood out too to me, just like the things they said, like when you were on the sidelines or in pregame, the things they're saying going into it. I would say Michigan State was up there too.
So many more questions, but we've taken enough of your time. So we're thrilled to have you on our Football Fridays at the EC. We look forward to sometime maybe when we can do this in person, but it's always good to have you back.
Well, Dolly, thank you so much for taking the time and having me. I hope we can all get back on the campus soon. Probably not this year, but hopefully for the 2021 season or maybe 2021 in the spring game. I'd love to make it back and be able to see how the campus has changed, be able to see everyone.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Go Irish.
Go Irish.
Hey Irish fans, how's it going? Sorry, it's just practicing my jingle, getting ready for the football season. Notre Dame football is back in Notre Dame Stadium. Notre Dame Fighting Irish taking on the Duke Blue Devils in South Bend. So excited to have football season back. Now, I know that 2020 has had a few obstacles, a few challenges, but let me tell you, they don't call us the Fighting Irish for nothing. I know for a fact when our players step on the field, they're ready to come for that national championship this year. Now, I know I got my mask on, but that doesn't stop me from cheering on the Fighting Irish. We know we got a great team. We got Ian Big, Coach Kelly coming back off the back of 3 10-plus win seasons. A lot of energy around South Bend, a lot of excitement for the Fighting Irish coming into this season. Now, I know we're playing the ACC this year, but I think it's time for us to come and say, everybody, you know what? We're coming for that ACC championship, and why not the national championship as well? Notre Dame Fighting Irish is back, and we'll see you here 2:30 p.m. Saturday, September 12th. Go Irish! Here we go!
In addition to the excitement around the start of a new college football season, today, September 11th, is also a day of remembrance. Most of us can remember exactly where we were and what we were doing as we watched those horrific events unfurl that day. Here on campus, then University President Reverend Edward Monk Malloy led the Notre Dame response with masses, prayer vigils, panel discussions, and more, both that day and in the weeks that followed.
Even though it happened 18 years ago, it seems like just yesterday in my memory bank. There was so much uncertainty in the air. Most of us watched the planes crashing into the towers in New York, and then subsequently the plane into the Pentagon. And even though we didn't see it live, we heard the reports about what happened in Western Pennsylvania. We knew that a lot of people had lost their life, that many of the police and firefighters and and first responders had risked their lives and many had lost their lives. So we felt a special obligation to them and their families. At Notre Dame, we tried to mobilize the faculty, staff, rectors, campus ministry to provide some perspective and words of consolation to our students who might be affected. The first home football game against Michigan State, after the event, we had flags all around the stadium. We had buckets where we raised money for the families of those who had lost lives. We played Amazing Grace with the two bands in the middle of the field, and I had a chance to say a prayer on national television. About 40 days out, I was invited by the New York City Police and Fire Departments to go to Ground Zero to experience it firsthand. So I smelled the smells and saw the sights and saw body parts being taken out, the playing of the trumpet and the flags being put respectfully over those that had been recovered. It was just amazing how much it impacted me, but it allowed me to come back to the campus and tell that story with a greater degree of vividness. Later on, we were able to pay for an ambulance and deliver it at St. Vincent's Hospital in New York, and we had a little ceremony when we were able to give it to them. All of us, of course, remember where we were for a certain age, and we recall all of the airplanes of the country coming down, all of the courageous ways of trying to recover bodies and support those who had so much uncertainty about their family members, and to be there in a respectful way as the dead were buried. We all along didn't want to blame anybody. We wanted to make sure our Muslim students felt comfortable and supported. We wanted to continue to reach out. We established the tradition of the Blue Mass for first responders, and we've been having that at Notre Dame ever since. So we've been trying to keep alive the memory. 10 years out, Father Jenkins asked me to preach at the Mass between the library and the stadium. And I mentioned that at the original Mass, instead of holding hands at the Lord's Prayer, they had locked arms. And people did that again. I was very moved by that. And then after Mass, pretty much everybody there marched down to the grotto and lit a candle and said a prayer. That's what we do at Notre Dame in times of challenge and difficulty. We say a prayer. And so let me do so now. Lord God, we ask and pray for peace in the world. We ask for peace with justice. We know that our country continues to struggle in its own way with injustice of various kinds and racial discord and some degree of violence. We pray for mutual understanding, that we might work together for the common good. We pray for those who lost loved ones on 9/11 and for their surviving family members. May we continue to be a force for good here at Notre Dame, and may we work for peace with justice. Amen.
Thank you, Father Malloy, for your reflections, your prayer, and your leadership at Notre Dame. And tomorrow afternoon, when the Irish take the field against Duke, it won't be in front of 80,000 fans. Stadium capacity will be capped at 20%, but students will be in attendance. While still masked and socially distanced, it won't be the same season opening atmosphere we're all used to. The students we caught up with, though, are happy to be in the stadium and back to cheering on the Irish.
I think that the stadium changes this fall will definitely help us keep safe and prevent the spread of COVID, but will definitely change the dynamic of what the football games used to be.
Well, I'm just happy we get to go in. As long as they're safe about it, I'm just really, really grateful that they're letting the students in. I think if they do it the right way, it can be successful. So I'm hopeful it works out.
I think it's really great that we're able to make changes so that students are able to go to the game. I'm really, really excited for that. I think that some people think it's a little bit of a bummer that it's not going to be like normal years, but I think that anything is better than nothing this year, so we're all really excited.
So we can stay on campus and enjoy football. It feels really fair for the students and the administration to kind of socially distance ourselves while watching the Irish play. So I think it's fair.
I think the stadium changes this fall are good. I mean, it's the only way we can have the games, so if that's what we have to do, I'm fine doing it. So I'm glad we're able to go to the games at all, so that's good.
Well, I think it's really good that they're trying to still let us experience the football games while also keeping everybody safe. So I support their decision to have 20% capacity.
Stadium changes this fall. I mean, I'm just happy to be at the games. It's my senior year. I get to sit with my roommates, and it'll be awesome. I'm excited.
One thing that you can definitely count on during the game tomorrow is hearing the greatest of all university fight songs, the Notre Dame Victory March. It's an iconic tune, and whether you're 3 or 93, odds are you know at least some of the words, just like our friend Declan.
Whether the odds be great or small. Well, what do you want to say to the Notre Dame football team?
I love you.
You say go Irish?
Go Irish.
Great job, Declan. I'm sure when the football team sees that, they'll love you too. Now, during halftime of the game tomorrow, millions of NBC viewers will get a chance to see the latest edition of Notre Dame's What Would You Fight For series. These award-winning segments showcase the work and impact of members of the Notre Dame family that fight to bring solutions to a world in need. But you get a first look here at Football Fridays.
Your goal is to go higher and higher, but the act of jumping high begins on the ground. The work is done as you approach the bar. 10 steps to build the foundation to send you on your desired path.
Notre Dame senior Sam Grew lost his leg to osteosarcoma, a type of bone cancer, when he was 13 years old.
I went from playing basketball and football with my friends to undergoing chemotherapy and treatments. I spent around 180 days and nights in the hospital. And my doctor's empathy, it helped me through some of my darkest days.
We used to think it was important to train emotional detachment. That was wrong. Here at Notre Dame, we're teaching and studying compassion from the perspectives of biology and neuroscience to help our future doctors and nurses have a foundation in a compassionate mindset, both for their patients' benefit as well as for themselves.
I know that there's more to medicine than the foundational science skills. And my best doctors communicated with me in easy-to-understand terms, and they motivated me to keep pursuing my own passions.
Sam Grew, the world title.
People like Professor Bashan are the unsung heroes of healthcare. He will impact thousands of students, which will impact hundreds of thousands of patients, all because they were grounded in the virtue of compassion.
It's an incredible time to be studying the science of compassion because everybody's hurting.
Having been the recipient of so much compassionate care, I felt that it was my duty to go and give that same treatment to others in my own career in medicine.
The University of Notre Dame asks, what would you fight for?
Fighting for compassion in medicine.
We are the Fighting Irish.
To talk about fighting for compassion in medicine, I'm happy to welcome in Beth Grizzoli, a double domer and the Director of Multimedia Services here at Notre Dame. Beth, thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here, Chris.
Now, tell us a little bit about the process of finding these stories overall and then sharing them with the Notre Dame family.
Sure. We work on this project all year round, believe it or not. And we turn over every stone on campus. We talk to all the colleges, all the institutes, the Office of Research, every level. We take ideas from everybody for these stories. There's a pretty high bar. The campaign, the story campaign, it does really sort of have a format. So the stories need to be able to be told visually. So they have to lend themselves to a visual storytelling, which is, different from print, etc. So that's how we do it. But we look for research and endeavors by our students and our faculty. We do sort of limit it to our students and our faculty that are compelling, that are timely, and that we think will really resonate with our viewers.
On this one specifically, Professor Vachon mentions in the clip how we're all hurting in some way, and that's really evident during the coronavirus pandemic. Does he have any thoughts on how this situation might impact his studies?
You need to talk to him, but we have talked to him about that, and I would say he mentioned he feels one silver lining of this pandemic has been that people recognize the stress and the chaos that healthcare workers have to work in an environment such as that, and that they need support, and that they really are heroes, and so that they need to be compassionate to themselves and take care of themselves as well as their patients. So I would say that he thinks probably the pandemic has revealed that and brought it to light, and that they are getting, public praise for their efforts, which helps.
What do you hope people take away from this story of Sam Grew and Professor Vachon?
Well, I hope. If they look at students like Sam and they are worried about the future, I hope it gives them some hope, because look at this generation, and they are some terrific young men and women, and they're going to be taking care of us in our later years, and I hope that gives them hope. And especially what Dr. Vachon is working with our students, that they realize that we're constantly striving to improve things. And that's what Notre Dame's all about, that we're learning more and we want to do better, and that these kids are just amazing.
Beth, thanks for joining us today. We'll see you back here next week.
I hope so. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. Now let's go ahead and take a look inside the stadium with the Notre Dame cheerleaders to get us psyched up for tomorrow's game.
Hi, I'm Megan, and I'm a senior studying science pre-professional. I'm excited to opening up the games with the Victory March. Go Irish!
Hi, I'm Charlie. I'm a senior studying industrial design, and I'm excited to see the boys back on the field. Go Irish!
Hi, I'm Chloe, and I'm a senior, and I'm studying biology, and I'm excited to make memories with my teammates this year. Go Irish!
Hi, I'm Michaela. I'm a senior studying accounting and finance, and I'm most excited to be back in the stadium.
Hi, I'm Ali. I'm a senior studying mechanical engineering and economics. I'm just happy to see my teammates and friends back in the stadium.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm a senior studying mechanical engineering, and I'm happy to keep the traditions going.
Let's go Irish!
Let's go Irish! Let's go Irish! Let's go Irish! Let's go Irish!
From the sidelines up into the press box, let's welcome in our next guest for Football Fridays. He's the senior editor at Blue and Gold Illustrated and knows just about as much about Notre Dame football as anybody. Entering his 40th year on the Fighting Irish beat from the class of 1984, Lou Samoji. Lou, thanks so much for joining us here today.
Always an honor, and it's like a quote from the Shawshank Redemption, 40 years, man, when you put it that way. That's Thank you for having me.
Thank you again. Now, before we dive into the season, the matchup tomorrow with Duke, let's talk about the biggest wild card for the fall. Coronavirus is giving us the most unique college football season in any of our lives. And besides the obvious like scheduling or stadium capacities, things like that, how does the pandemic impact this Notre Dame football team?
Well, so far they've done just a magnificent job of being able to withstand it with discipline. And, you need some luck along the way too. But, last week they had 196 tests and all were negative, and it's such a positive. And then on Monday they announced they had 215 tests and all of them were negative again. So you talk about acing exams and tests, it doesn't get any better than that. And they're going to be able to have a full roster in terms of just being able to avoid some mishaps with the coronavirus.
Now, let's make an assumption here and assume that everybody stays healthy. We do get through a full season. This team has depth and experience at some really key positions on both sides of the offensive and defensive line, under center, of course, with Ian Book. But it does have some question marks on both sides of the ball, thinking in the defensive backfield, the offensive backfield, out wide maybe too. What are your broad thoughts and expectations about this team heading into the year?
Well, I've been following Notre Dame football for 50 years, and I look at the schedule and I say this is probably 2 or 3 most favorable schedules I've seen for Notre Dame, just in the way it falls. Now, let's not mistake favorable for easy. I'm never going to say anything is easy, especially in this game and with what you're facing this year with the pandemic. But as far as you just look at it, the only team on there is Clemson, obviously, at home on November 7th, where you say, okay, that team might be superior to Notre Dame. And it is going to be considered superior because it is the preseason number 1, and they've had a 5 or 6 year run here that has been among the most impressive you'll see in college football annals. But when you look at the depth and the way they've been able to develop people, just the fact you look at the defensive end position, you lost 2 guys to the NFL who are captains, and this year's 2 defensive ends, Ade Ogundiji and Dalen Hayes, are both captain-elects, just like last year, and NFL prospects. It has become a program the last 3 years, going into the 4th year here, where that 33-6 record, even though they haven't beaten anyone ranked in the or finished in the top 10 there, but it's the 6th best record in college football among 130 football bowl subdivision teams. They've been able to perpetuate that success continuously, and they're in a really good spot right now. Frankly, anything less than 10-1 this year and a berth into the championship game of the ACC, which will be held either December 12th or December 19th in Charlotte, I think would be viewed as a disappointment.
So high expectations. You mentioned a couple of the guys, especially on the defensive line there. No surprise when Notre Dame released its depth chart that Hayes and Ogundiji are right there at the top. But what were some names on that depth chart, that 2 deep, of course, knowing that those can change very quickly? What were some names that jumped out that maybe surprised you a little bit?
Well, it unquestionably was on the back end of the defense, specifically the secondary, where Tariq Bracy coming back, he had the 4th most snaps among all defensive backs last year at cornerback, and he led the team in passes broken up with 7, and yet he is listed as basically a co-starter. They have the or with Clarence Lewis, a freshman who, among the 3 cornerbacks that Notre Dame signed, he came in maybe with the least fanfare because the other 2 were early entrants back in January. Not that that helped too much because spring practice eventually was canceled, the final 14, although both Caleb Alford and Ramon Henderson were able to engage in a winter conditioning program here. But for him to jump out that way, to meet to be considered a co-starter with your top returning cornerback on the field side at the position, that really was eye-opening. And then when Brian Kelly starts making comparisons to Kavari Russell in 2012, who was a freshman All-American on a team that went 12-0 in the regular season, that's high praise indeed. And then also in the secondary, Sean Crawford, he's been mainly a nickel and a corner. He's in his 6th year. He's missed 3 seasons with injuries, but he has so much respect that it earned him a captaincy, and he's been a great playmaker as well. Brian Kelly said he would be a placeholder at the safety position, and he sees the starting strong safety role over Houston Griffith, a top 50 recruit who's a junior now, and Ohio State transfer Isaiah Pryor, who started 7 games there as a sophomore a couple of years ago on a 13-1 team. And then offensively, Kyron Williams at the running back position, sophomore. They liked him a lot last year when he reported as a freshman, and they wanted to really integrate him into the offense. He had 4 carries for 26 yards in the blowout game 2 against New Mexico. But by the 4th game, they decided to redshirt him, and he redefined his body, lost 9 pounds, sleeker, quicker. He has that threat as a pass receiver out of the backfield as well. And he and Chris Tyree, a top 100 recruit at running back and one of the fastest players in the nation, they might be able to form a dynamic young tandem at that running back position.
Looking ahead to tomorrow, David Cutcliffe, by all accounts, has done a great job at Duke, including, of course, a couple of years ago coming to South Bend and leaving with a win. Last year, though, a bit of a rough one for him and the kind of standards they've elevated down there in Durham. What do you expect from the Blue Devils this year?
I expect them to bounce back. That year they defeated Notre Dame in 2016. They finished 4-8, and Daniel Jones was a young quarterback then. And they bounced back well the next couple of years, going to bowls, winning bowl games. And Daniel Jones became one of the top 10 picks in the NFL draft. And that's always been kind of the hallmark of David Cutcliffe's teams, whether he was coaching Peyton Manning as an offensive coordinator at Tennessee, or Eli Manning as the head coach at Ole Miss, or Daniel Jones, one of the great passing game gurus in the industry. He got a Clemson transfer, 4-star recruit in Chase Bryce to handle the offense, which last year uncharacteristically really struggled, especially with the passing game. Averaged only about 179 yards a game, and just so many things just didn't click for them.
To put you on the spot, what's your score prediction for tomorrow?
I was looking at something similar to last year's opener at Louisville, which was 35-17. I think in the addition I picked something like 34-17, 34-16, along those lines. I expect a more improved Duke team to come out there and kind of they were just really bad last year against Notre Dame. Looked helpless in that 38-7 defeat. So I think they will come in with a determined attitude, and I'm sure Notre Dame will come in with tremendous excitement as well, because as many of the players said yesterday, it's like, yeah, the stadium's not going to be what it was when it's full and all, but for a while there, they were wondering whether there was just going to be any season at all. And so there's just such a gratefulness that there is. So how sharp the two teams will be, we'll see. We'll see on Saturday afternoon. But I'll go with something like 35-17, 34-16 along that line.
Sounds great. Lou, thanks so much for joining us today. Hope to chat with you again later in the season.
I do too. Thank you very much for having me.
Now, regardless of how you became a part of the Notre Dame family, almost all of us have some connection to the football team. Whether it's watching game replays on Sunday with your family, your first game in the student section, or taking part in some of the best rivalries in college football, the Irish have a way of bringing us all together as they march onward to victory.
Over the years, Notre Dame football has provided some iconic moments for players and fans alike. Tom Clements to Robin Weber in the 1973 Sugar Bowl. Pat Terrell's last-minute pass breakup against Miami. The game of the century in 1993 against Florida State. And a goal line stand for the ages in the rain against Stanford. But some of the best memories happen on the sidelines, in the stands, or outside the stadium. Whether you're a kid losing your first tooth in the stadium, dreaming about the day you're the one running out of the tunnel in a cheerleading uniform or that golden helmet, or celebrating your 40th birthday with your family in the house that Rock built, Notre Dame brings us all together. Even when your twin brother is a die-hard Michigan fan. Kevin and Keith Davis grew up in Peoria, Illinois, but became a Notre Dame fan and a Michigan fan early on.
One day, two twin boys at the age of 3 watching a football game on TV, and one said, "I picked this team." The other one said, "I'll pick this team," and that's where rivalry grew.
In some ways, the rivalry is as deep now as it was back then.
It's a serious rivalry because it's like, I don't even like to use yellow highlighters.
But in others, it's brought the brothers closer together.
It's a saying I use: best of friends, worst of enemies.
Mm-hmm.
We're real close. We're real close, best friends. We do everything like together, right together. That game though, you cannot say anything to me. He can't say anything to me.
2 years ago, Kevin and Keith went to the Notre Dame Michigan game in South Bend. And for the brothers who have competed and pushed each other their entire lives, it's a memory they'll never forget.
Growing up in poverty, we didn't get an opportunity to go have that experience. So when we finally got to have that experience, actually go to the game of our lives, it's just the fact that just to be able to sit in the atmosphere of that rivalry was phenomenal.
Just the atmosphere, that rivalry being renewed, and just atmosphere of the campus that day and the stadium, it was just an awesome experience. So, they played each other a number of times over the years. Every moment we won sticks out to me.
If you have a fun Notre Dame story, we want to hear about it. Kids, pets, marriages, trips. Let us know in the comments or send us a message and you might just see it highlighted here next week. Now, our next guest is entering his 11th season as the head coach at Notre Dame. He's led the Irish to 5 years of at least 10 wins and 2 undefeated regular seasons. Notre Dame's 33-6 record over the past 3 years is the best for the program since the late 1980s. The Dick Corbett head football coach, Brian Kelly, now joins Dolly Duffy, the executive director of your Notre Dame Alumni Association.
Good afternoon, Coach Kelly. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Dolly, for having me on.
It's so great to see you. It's been a long time.
Too long, Dolly. We've spent a lot of time in the month of May visiting a lot of the alumni network, cities, and to miss that because of the pandemic, we're going to have to do that twice as much next year.
You're on.
All right.
So you're starting your 30th year as a college football head coach, but we've never seen anything like this before. What are your thoughts about that? And when you think about looking back, what will you remember so far?
Well, I think there were times when, I thought this was my first year as being a head coach because there were so many uncertainties, things that you had never dealt with before, splitting up a locker room, making sure that your practice schedule was such that you were socially distanced, wearing a mask during a practice situation, so things that were challenging that had never been challenging before. Blowing a whistle, now it's an electronic whistle. Being able to, articulate your message when you have a mask on your face. All the things that you take for granted that make it more difficult to talk to 115 people on a day-to-day basis. We have to have staff meetings by Zoom, as you know. When we meet as a team, we can only fit 80 in our room. We have 120 on the team. The rest have to be in another room, and we have to rebroadcast it, into other rooms. So challenges that you would never think of when you take on this challenge as a head coach.
And I'm sure a lot of them that would never dawn on the rest of us. But unlike a lot of teams, you have been able to avoid the high numbers of positive tests. So what are you and your team doing to be so successful on this front?
Well, it was our reintegration plan. I think that's where it starts, Dolly, is that we didn't even bring our guys back in here unless they were committed to coming back and understanding that this was going to be about their human behavior and how they handled themselves. And so we started with, clearly letting our players know that this was optional and that if they chose this option, it was not going to be easy. It was going to be difficult. And I think the second piece is that the university was gracious enough to allow us to use the Morris Inn as our bubble to start. And we used that to an advantage where we really locked down for the first 3 weeks, where our players were not allowed to leave campus. They weren't allowed to leave the Morris Inn. We wore face coverings for everything. We were very, very disciplined in all of the protocols and procedures, which gave our guys a great base and understanding on how they needed to operate when things were going to get more difficult, i.e. when the students came back on campus and large gatherings became more, probable, and certainly they were, and we were able to fight through a lot of those things. So I think it was our reintegration policy, and then being, very, very diligent in the procedures and policies that were in place.
You have done an amazing amount of work with the whole peer accountability and leadership testing of your team. And all of a sudden, it is as important as ever. And your team has been very spoken out. They've been speaking out about telling other students to be safe. Would you have ever thought that this is where it would come into play?
Well, I think there were times where, we certainly knew that, at times when we had these conversations that the football team was going to be given an incredible opportunity. When Father Jenkins allowed the football team back on campus, our first meeting was, we cannot let Father Jenkins and the university down. We have to set the standard here. And setting the standard means accountability for our actions. So we can then, if we hold up our end of it, we can then hold others to that same level. Because if you don't do it yourself, there's no way that you can then speak to others. And we were able to do it on our end. And then that's where the peer accountability, it allows us then to come back and ask our students to live up to those same standards.
And now your students will be really at the forefront of cheering for the team on Saturday. But there's going to be limited fans. Just for the record, I want you to know I'm going to be there. Wouldn't miss.
We knew you wouldn't miss. It's not possible.
Thank you. And so how are you going to keep the team motivated with such a limited number of people in the stands and an inability to have as much noise?
Right. Well, these are athletes that clearly understand how important it is for them to be in their own zone, in their optimal zone. In other words, how they play their best. Look, there's always going to be ups and downs in a game, but they have to find how they play their best in their optimal zone. And so finding that optimal zone is what we have been working on for the last 3-4 weeks. We knew that there weren't going to be a lot of people in the stadium. So just working on that in practice, understanding that they had to find that. Some have to tune it up a little bit. Some have to tune it down, and finding that optimal zone. They can't rely on fans. They can rely a little bit on their teammates on the sideline, but it's up to them to finding that right zone. And so we've worked on that diligently in the mental preparation of our football team. Look, it's not all about the physical and the technical and the tactical pieces. It's the mental preparation as well. So we have taken that into account, knowing that there's not going to be a lot of fans in the stands. The artificial noise only gets you so much. It's really about finding that optimal zone in the mental preparation.
Well, I promise that I'll do my part to be as loud as I can in the stands.
Thank you. We'll take it.
So in addition to this pandemic, there's been a lot of conversation about the racial injustices and racial challenges, and especially among the members of your team. They've taken real leadership positions in putting forth some things both on campus and also off campus in the community. And so tell me a little bit about those conversations.
Well, I think, in any business or organization, I think it starts with, making sure that they know that they have a voice. And, if the leader of that business or organization, doesn't give them that opportunity, or they don't feel comfortable speaking, they're not going to speak. And so I think it started with me, and I had enough myself as it related to social injustice and racism in our country. And I needed to speak up first, and I needed to be, that role model for our guys, and then give them the platform. We used our social media pieces to give our guys a platform to use their voice. We took it to the next step in our community here at Notre Dame to get out in our community and have a rally to galvanize the community itself and to allow them to feel comfortable with using their own voice. And I think that that's been a great piece. And we continue to move forward with our own Unity Council, where we've registered all of our players now to vote, and they'll be voting in the general election. So again, I think it starts with the leaders, and then they empower those that can use their voice and make positive change.
It was so great to see the team during the Juneteenth march on campus, and how proud they were that you were right there at the helm with all of them.
Well, again, look, it's one thing to talk about it, but I think you have to be, in there with them. And like I said, I don't have all the answers, but I know that I have to be part of this change as well, and learn and grow every single day. And the best place to grow is to be part of the action. And I learned a lot from that day. I continue to learn every day, and it was certainly a galvanizing day for our entire community.
That's great. So tell me, was there any feedback from the team when you announced that our goal is to win the ACC Conference Championship? I loved that.
Yeah, certainly. We're extremely grateful to the ACC and giving us this opportunity to compete for a championship. We certainly would have been a challenge in terms of games. I think Jack Swarbrick would have been able to scrabble together a schedule, but being in the ACC is a great opportunity to compete for a championship in the ACC. And so our guys are excited about it. They're looking forward to this opportunity, and as well compete for a national championship, which is our mission here, is to graduate our players and play for a national championship. But adding that trophy as well has been one what our guys are really excited about.
That's pretty exciting. So one final question, because I know you're busy. I read this morning where Bruce Springsteen is coming out with a new album. Just in time for your birthday.
It is. It's entitled appropriately "A Letter to Me" on my birthday. No, maybe I added that. Maybe it's just a letter to me. But yes, and I was so grateful to your daughter, who really, Riley. She kind of tipped me off on it. But it's going to be nice for all of those Springsteen fans out. You and I are certainly counted as some of them. But right around my birthday, for him to do this for me during this pandemic, I'll be forever grateful.
I think it was pretty kind. Well, it's great to see you. Thanks on behalf of all of our alumni for all you do. You are consistently generous. You're quick to say yes, and just know how much we appreciate it.
Well, again, it's been difficult for all of alums not having the opportunity to be in this stadium. Hopefully things change down the road. We'll see what happens, but we'll keep putting together a football team that they're proud of, and you'll be proud of the way these guys play this weekend.
Good luck. Go Irish.
Thanks, Dolly. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Coach.
Take care.
So as we wrap up today, I want to thank our guests, Brian Kelly, Brady Quinn, and Lou Emoji for joining us, as well as our student performers. We hope you'll come back in a few hours for Chalk Talk at 4:30, where former Irish coaches Bill Lewis and Bill Reagan will break down the X's and O's of tomorrow's matchup with Duke. We'll see you back here next week for our next edition of Football Fridays at the ECK. But for now, I'm Chris Palmquist. Go Irish, beat Blue Devils.